The Nintendo Switch 2 situation just got a very interesting update because there's no shortage of talk about this thing online. You can look at all corners of the internet and see that obviously there's a lot of demand around what Nintendo is doing next, and people want details on what we can expect from the next generation Nintendo console that we logically know to expect sometime soon. We are already at a point within the Nintendo Switch's life cycle where it is the longest ever running home console device without us knowing about next-gen hardware, and we don't know anything officially at this point in time outside of some comments from Nintendo stating that yes, they are working on what is next when it comes to Nintendo consoles, and we've had that infamous slide floating around for years now stating that things like Nintendo account and value-added services will roll forward into next-generation hardware for Nintendo, aka your Nintendo Switch Online membership in some way, shape, or form will transfer forward. I'm hopeful that includes online play and all of the retro consoles that come along with NSO, but we will have to wait and see for that. And while you can really deep dive this stuff and scour multiple corners of the internet to find things that do suggest that companies are ramping up for a new game console that will be coming out likely in the year of 2024, with recent reports circulating that Foxconn is reporting a big Q1 of 2024 because they're ramping up metal case manufacturing for a new Nintendo console to launch sometime next year, and you even have companies like Pixar that actually work on technologies in the Joy-Con as well as the Wii and Wii U. They've been a long-time Nintendo partner, also reporting that they are going to have an uptick in business in 2024 due to some kind of game console. And you have the supposed leak of a dev kit being in the hands of Mercury Steam, who of course has worked on Metroid Dread amongst many other Nintendo titles. It is hard to ever get to a source that is somewhat credible stating that they have exact information on Nintendo Switch 2 dev kits and some of the key features about the device, and that is what we have to go through today because recently an article blew up online over at VGC, which, to give them some kind of background, they are one of the more credible websites. When you see some of these smaller Switch 2 new Nintendo Switch reports, they really don't go running with them. In fact, it's been many months since we've quoted VGC saying anything about new Nintendo hardware at all, and this particular story is a big deal because they are the source on it, and the name behind it, Andy Robinson, definitely has a notable amount of credibility within the gaming industry from his peers and media partners alike. And we have to start there with what exactly is being claimed in this article, as you can see the following posted up directly over on VGC, where it reads: sources, Nintendo targets 2024 with next-gen console. Key partners have development kits ahead of a planned launch, sources tell VGC. According to multiple people with knowledge of Nintendo's next-gen console plans, the company is likely to release new hardware during the second half of 2024 to ensure that it has ample stock available on day one and to avoid the kind of shortages seen with the PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X and S. Although specific details on the console are being kept closely guarded, those VGC spoke to indicated that the next-gen console would be able to be used in portable mode similar to the Nintendo Switch. Two sources VGC spoke to suggested the console could launch with an LCD screen instead of the more premium OLED in order to bring down costs, especially considering the increased storage needed for higher fidelity games. The current Switch comes with just 32 gigabytes of internal memory, while many current-gen PlayStation and Xbox games are over 100 gigabytes. Like its predecessor, the new Nintendo console will also accept physical games via a cartridge slot, the sources said. Other details such as backwards compatibility support for Switch games, physical and digital, remains unclear. Nintendo has said it wants to convert as many of the Switch's 100+ million user base as possible to its next system, although some third-party publishers are said to have expressed concern that legacy support for Switch games could negatively affect sales of next-gen titles. Nintendo did not immediately respond to VGC's request for comment on this story. Tokyo-based industry consultant Dr. Suriken Toto told VGC that a 2024 console launch would make sense for Nintendo since it's projected to see a double-digit decline in Switch hardware and software sales this year after it cleared 7 years in the market. In May, Nikkei Asia claimed to have been informed by a source close to Nintendo that work on the company's next console appears to be going smoothly. Development seems to be progressing well, they said, but a product launch won't happen before next spring at the earliest. Now, there's a lot of info to unpack with that article, and we will get to all of it, but I first want to tackle the launch timing, because that particular portion of the article, while many people are insinuating that this for sure means it will be a holiday launch in 2024, since it says it's likely to launch in the second half of 2024, that is also the part of the article that sounds the most like speculation of me and trying to figure out what the timing might be, as opposed to actually knowing. Some other facts in the article are straight up statements. That one says likely to launch in the second half of 2024. That could mean that based off what they are hearing, that anything early in the year is very unlikely, and if anything, that may be when we get the reveal for the console, and then something like a summer or fall or even holiday 2024 launch is what is likely to be on the table. But again, likely does not mean that that is information that they for sure know. Tackling something that is known information, at least according to these sources, is it sounds like we may be stepping back to LCD technology for the launch of this next generation Nintendo device. Now, if you are an OLED model owner and you know the quality difference in handheld mode from the OLED display compared to the OG original LCD display, you may be very disheartened to learn that, although I do want to give you a couple things to think about on it. Might not be as big of a blow as we're expecting. One, LCD is cheaper, no doubt. It is also less premium, but LCD technology has come a long way since the original Switch shipped and sold back in March of 2017. Depending on what type of LCD display you have and how the pixels are actually lighting up behind the screen, whether it be mini LED or some other tech, they can do a lot now to make an LCD screen very competitive to an OLED display, although it can't quite match that true level of deep blacks on the screen and the color contrast. It can still do a lot to get very close, and I don't think that we're going to be playing on something that is a true OG Nintendo Switch experience on that LCD display, but rather it will be potentially a slight step down in color contrast, but not a game breaker for anybody out there more than likely. When it comes to the storage of the console, it'll be very interesting to see the route that Nintendo goes there. I do think and do tend to buy into the idea that Nintendo is going to try to cut costs down as low as possible on this thing, because if they are going with a much more powerful chipset, something that can run games that are more modern, the PS4, even Xbox Series S level of power type of conversation, you are definitely going to have enough storage for some of the larger games. Just the commitment that providing the Microsoft Activision Blizzard merger goes through, that Call of Duty will be coming to Nintendo platforms for the next 10 years, you're probably going to need something more than 32 gigabytes like we have on the base Switch today, or even 64 gigabytes that we have on the OLED model. I think something like 256 would be a nice sweet spot to actually start off, but that's clearly going to drive up costs in some respects, and Nintendo will need to offset that some other way. Now, one great piece of news of this article has to do with the fact that the cartridge slot is indeed intact, and that tells me while there is no confirmed knowledge of backwards compatibility, it is a great sign that we are continuing the cartridge form factor, and I do tend to think that Nintendo will keep to their historical trend with this console, where they support the most recent device with backwards compatibility, just like the 3DS having that cartridge slot that has a slightly different shaped cartridge that can go in there, but you can still put in an original DS cartridge and play them just the same. Outside of the Switch from the Wii U, we historically see Nintendo almost always, with the exception of older consoles, have some form of backwards compatibility intact, and I don't think that there's any way for them to walk away from the Switch library with a lot of the games that Nintendo puts out. And keep in mind, they're the main ones wanting to make money off of the next generation hardware. They're evergreen titles. Could they potentially make more by re-releasing them as deluxe versions on the next gen console? Yes, but we're also going to see a lot of games like Super Mario Bros. Wonder, Super Mario RPG that are just barely coming out at the end of the Nintendo Switch's life cycle, and they may want to push those games to be able to sell on next gen consoles without putting in any additional development dollars to make the new versions stand out from the old versions and make you justify the purchase in your head to go pick up those games on the Nintendo Switch 2 version. I do think that while likely in future console generations we will see physical games ultimately go away, I think Nintendo actually stays around as the last one in the physical game fight. I think they will be selling physical cartridges far longer than Sony and Microsoft, maybe by a full generation or two, but it's good to hear that it will be intact for the successor to the Nintendo Switch. Now, the last thing to point out from the article is just simply the fact that these sources that are talking to VGC, they now have these dev kits in the hands of key developers, and that's a big deal. That means Nintendo is doubling down on their strategy and getting the pieces rolling for a big 2024 launch, and I do personally believe that with all of the mounting evidence, that is an extremely likely year to see it happen, although I do think there's some debate to be had on whether it launches earlier in the year or later. I am personally setting my expectations towards a second half of 2024 launch, like this article suggests, but you can never say never with Nintendo, and they could throw some kind of curveball and do a springtime launch like we saw them do with the original Nintendo Switch. But I really want to hear from you guys at this point in the video, your personal thoughts and opinions on the latest round of reports and sources suggesting that dev kits are in the hands of devs, LCD screen versus OLED for the next gen console, storage and cost being overall concerns, the cartridge slot for sure returning. Do you think this thing launches at something like a $399 price point? That's definitely where I'm leaning towards. How do you personally feel about that LCD OLED situation? Do you think that we're going to have this console out for 2 years and then Nintendo will indeed release some kind of OLED model upgrade for it? Because I could definitely see them repeating that history since it worked out very well in the current Nintendo Switch's life cycle. And what, if anything, do you think this signals about backwards compatibility? Are you feeling better or worse about it following the report? So regardless of your thoughts and feelings on everything we talked about today, I do look forward to hearing from you all in the comments down below before you leave the video, as I do look forward to getting back and forth conversation started with you all around these topics. Go watch yesterday's video next if you haven't already, which is on screen right now. Also make sure you like, subscribe, turn on your notification bell, and I will see you guys in the next video.